Very good day, students. Recently, an amendment has been brought in the valuation of the perquisite on account of provision of residential accommodation by the employer, and in that case, it is provided that if the accommodation is continued to be provided to the employee year on year, then in the subsequent years, the value of the perquisite cannot exceed a particular amount, which is basically the inflation adjusted value. So we will look at this particular concept in this video. So just to briefly recap first, how do we compute the value of rent-free residential accommodation provided by the employer? If the employer is the government, then the value is the license fees. It's as simple as that. If it is provided by any other employer, that means not being the government, then if the accommodation is owned by the employer, the value is a specified percentage of salary, and this depends on the population of city. Up to 15 lakh population, 5%, more than 50 lakh and 15 lakh and up to 40 lakh, 7.5%, and more than 40 lakh, 10%. If the accommodation is taken on lease or rent by the employer, and the valuation is lower of lease rental or 10% of salary. And then there is a case where the accommodation is provided by the employer in a hotel. If the accommodation is furnished, in these two cases, if the accommodation is furnished, then we add a particular amount. If the furniture is owned by the employer, we add 10% per annum of the cost of furniture. If the furniture is hired by the employer, we add the higher charges. And if where the accommodation is provided at concession rate to the value that we arrive, we reduce the rent actually paid by the employee, and this brings us to the amount of the value of the perquisite that we need to add to the income taxable under the head salaries. Now, there can be a case where the accommodation is provided, the same accommodation is provided to the same employee by the same employee year on year. Okay, so where the accommodation is owned or taken on lease or rent by the employer. So basically, in this case, we are talking about this particular case. We are not talking about the government employer, we are talking about the non-government employer where the accommodation is owned or taken on lease or rent by the employer, and the same accommodation is continued to be provided to the same employee for more than one previous year. Then we need to adjust the valuation on account of inflation. So the amount calculated in case B above, non-government employer, whether owned by the employer or whether taken on lease or rent by the employer. So this particular valuation is what we would generally arrive at. Okay, but this valuation that we basically arrive, if the accommodation is furnished, we add this as well. So basically this whole valuation that we basically arrive, it cannot exceed a particular amount, and the objective is to rationalize the valuation so that the valuation is in line with the inflation trend. Okay, so if for example if for example, you know, the accommodation is first provided in previous year, say 24-25, and to the same employee it is provided in 25-26 and 26-27 as well, right? So there will be a particular value of the perquisite that we will arrive at, but when we arrive at the perquisite value for 25-26 and 26-27, this valuation cannot exceed a particular amount, and the government wants to rationalize this particular value for these two previous years to say that this value should not rise above the value of 24-25 by more than the cost inflation index. The cost inflation index, remember, it is the same cost inflation index which we use to compute the index cost of acquisition or the index cost of improvement while computing capital gain, and that reflects the inflation index, right? So that indicates to us the amount of inflation occurring year on year. So this is the same index that we apply for rationalizing this valuation of accommodation, the perquisite value as well. So let's look at the provision and how this inflation linked adjusted valuation works. So as we saw that if the same accommodation continues to be provided to the same employee for more than 1 year, the amount calculated in case B above, okay, cannot exceed the following, and this is how we compute the amount to which the valuation needs to be restricted. So we calculate first the value calculated above. That means the value calculated as per this particular provision, okay, under point number B for non-government employee. So value calculated above, that means without adjusting for any inflation for the first previous year. And what is the first previous year? It is the previous year in which accommodation was provided to the employee, but it cannot be before previous year 23-24. Okay, so this will basically be later of previous year 23-24 or the previous year in which accommodation was provided to the employee. So it will be, in our example, it will be later of previous year 23-24 or previous year 24-25. So it will be basically previous year 24-25. So the value that we arrive at for previous year 24-25. Now we multiply it by a ratio, okay, by a fraction, and this fraction represents the extent of inflation. Okay, the extent of inflation. So what we take is, first we take cost inflation index for the previous year for which the value is calculated. So for example, we are calculating the value for previous year 25-26. So we take the cost inflation index for this year, okay, and then we divide it by cost inflation index for the previous year in which accommodation was initially provided to the employee. That means cost inflation index for 24-25 in our example. Okay, so what we basically do, we take the value calculated above for first previous year. In our example, it is previous year 24-25 multiplied by CII of, say, when we are computing it, the value for 25-26, CII for 25-26 divided by CII for 24-25. Okay, so CII for 25-26 will obviously be more than CII of 24-25. So it will be a positive fraction, right? It will be more than 1, right? So basically when we apply this, the value calculated for 24-25 will rise to a certain extent, okay, and that will be the limit. So the actual value of perquisite that we figure out for 25-26 cannot exceed this value that we compute. Okay, so if for example the 24-25 valuation is, say, 1,000 rupees, the value of perquisite on account of accommodation, and in 25-26 we arrive at the value as per the regular computation as, say, 1,500, but as per this particular formula, the value which is inflation adjusted is what we arrive at, say, 1,200 only. So the value of perquisite that will be taken will be 1,200, not 1,500. And similarly we will do for 26-27. But if say the actual value for 25-26 is 1,200 that we arrive at, and the inflation adjusted value is what we say calculate at 1,400. So since this 1,200 doesn't exceed 1,400, the actual value 1,200 will only be taken. So this is how the concept works. And now let's see an example to understand this better. Saurabh joined the office of D Limited in Delhi as its marketing manager with effect from 1st April 2024. During the previous year 24-25, he received basic salary of 50,000 per month and taxable allowance of 5,000 per month. He was provided a rent-free residential accommodation by D Limited. This was owned by D Limited. It was provided with effect from 1st April 24. Along with furniture. Furniture cost rupees 1 lakh to D Limited. The accommodation continued to be provided to him by D Limited during the previous years 25-26 and 26-27 as well. The emoluments received by Saurabh were increased by 20% with effect from 1st April 26. Determine the taxable value of perquisite on account of residential accommodation for previous years 24-25 to 26-27 and assume the cost inflation index for previous years 24-25 to 26-27 as 400, 413, 460. So these are not the actual CII, these are the assumed CII. So in the question you will be given cost inflation index, which you can then apply. So how do we basically figure out? First, we calculate the value of perquisite without adjusting for inflation. That means as per the regular computation provisions of the perquisite. Previous year 24-25, 25-26, 26-27. Now salary for the purpose of computing the valuation of the perquisite on account of accommodation. So we will include basic salary as well as taxable allowances. Okay, as per the computation formula. So 50,000 per month is the basic, and taxable allowance is 5,000. So basically it is 55,000 per month. So it becomes 6,60,000. For 25-26 also same, but this is increased by 20% from 1st April 26. So for previous year 26-27 we will add 20% and this will be 7,92,000. Now what will be the value of rent-free furnished accommodation? The accommodation is owned by the employer, okay, and the employer delimited is not central government or state government, and the population of Delhi is more than 40 lakh. So basis the population, the valuation will be at the rate of 10% of salary. This will be the value of perquisite as per the normal computation. So it will be 66,000, 66,000, 79,200. Okay, and since it is furnished, we will add the value of furniture. Since the value is owned by D Limited and the cost is 1 lakh, it will be 10% per annum of 1 lakh. So it will be 10,000, 10,000 and 10,000. This will remain the same. So the value of rent-free furnished accommodation will be the total of this, of this, of this. So it will be 76, 76 and 89,200. So this is the valuation without making any adjustment on account of inflation. But now we see in the question that the accommodation is owned by D Limited and the same accommodation is continued to be provided to Saurav for more than one previous year. If this is the fact pattern in the question, then we need to understand that the taxable value then cannot exceed the value adjusted for inflation. And then the taxable value will be computed as follows: previous year 24-25, 25-26, 26-27. Now taxable value for previous year 24-25. So for 24-25, 24-25 is actually the first year, and therefore it need not be adjusted for any inflation. So the value will remain at 76,000. No adjustment is required. But when we calculate for 25-26 and 26-27, adjustment will need to be checked. So now taxable value for previous year 25-26. Which is what? Which is 76,000 without any adjustment. Now this value cannot exceed the amount that we just now saw in the formula. This value cannot exceed the value calculated as per this formula. So going back to our example, this value cannot exceed, that means 76,000 cannot exceed what? Value computed for previous year 24-25. This is the first previous year. First previous year is what? Later of previous year 23-24 or the previous year in which accommodation is provided. Accommodation is provided from previous year 24-25. So the first previous year become 24-25. So value computed for previous year 24-25, which is 76,000. Okay, multiplied by CII for previous year 25-26. We are calculating the value for this previous year. Okay, it is 430 as per the question. And CII for previous year 24-25, the first previous year, it is 400 as per this as per the question. So 76,000 multiplied by 430 by 400, this comes to 81,700. So basically the taxable value cannot exceed 81,700. So as we see, taxable value is itself 76,000. It is not exceeding 81,700. So no adjustment is required for 25-26 also. So 76,000 will continue to be the value of perquisite for this previous year. Now let's look at previous year 26-27. Similarly, taxable value for previous year 26-27. This is what we computed as per the normal computation. But this cannot exceed what? Value computed for previous year 24-25. Which is what? Which is 76,000 multiplied by the fraction or the ratio. What? CII for previous year 26-27, which is 460 as per the question, divided by CII for previous year 24-25, which is 400 as per the question. So this amount is the limit, and which means 87,400. So the valuation cannot exceed 87,400, but it is exceeding at 89,200. So we will have to limit the valuation to 87,400. So this is how the value will be computed for each of these previous years. Now there are these questions, and there is a question on this particular topic as well. Practice this question. If you have any doubts, questions, queries, write down immediately in the comment box, or if you have my WhatsApp or Telegram number, just call me up or write there, and I will respond to you as soon as possible. See you very soon in my next video. Very good luck and good wishes to you. Goodbye.